There's a voice in your head right now. Maybe it's reading these words back to you. Maybe it's commenting on them. Maybe it just said, "What voice?" Most people assume everyone has one, that it's just part of being human, that the running commentary, the internal debate, the voice that narrates your day is universal. But it isn't. A measurable portion of adults have almost no inner voice at all. Not silence between thoughts, actual silence. No words, no narration, no internal sound of any kind. Their minds don't run on language, and most of them had no idea that wasn't normal until someone told them. The question isn't just why some people have it and some people don't. The question is where it comes from, what it actually is, and what happens when the system that runs it breaks. Because when it breaks, it doesn't just go quiet. It turns into something else entirely. Let's start at the beginning. In 370 BC, Plato described thinking as an internal conversation a person has with themselves. Not a metaphor, not a philosophical flourish. He meant it literally. The mind, he wrote, was the soul talking to itself in silence. For the next 2,000 years, nobody had a better explanation. Then, in 1934, a Soviet psychologist named Lev Vygotsky published something that changed everything we knew about where the voice actually comes from. He'd been watching children. Between the ages of 3 and 6, children talk constantly, and not to anyone in particular. They narrate their own action. They argue with themselves. They describe what they're doing while they're doing it. Now I put the block here. Now the other block goes there. No, not there, here. Piaget called this egocentric speech and assumed it was meaningless, a developmental phase children would grow out of. Vygotsky thought Piaget had it completely backwards. He argued that this out-loud self-talk wasn't a childish habit children needed to drop. It was the mechanism by which children were learning to regulate their own behavior. The voice they were hearing out loud was becoming the voice they would later use silently inside for the rest of their lives. Around age 7 or 8, something happened. The talking doesn't stop. It goes underground. The voice that had been running out loud, narrating actions, solving problems, managing frustration, simply sinks beneath the surface. It becomes inner speech, invisible, silent, but still running. And here's what makes this stranger than it sounds. Deaf children who were never taught spoken language, who have never heard a word in their lives, still develop private speech, except instead of words, they sign to themselves when they're alone. Same behavior, same developmental arc, same internal function. The voice isn't about sound at all. It's something deeper, something the brain builds regardless of whether the ears work. So what exactly is it? Neuroimaging studies show that when you run through a sentence in your head silently, without moving your lips, your brain activates Broca's area, the same region that fires when you speak out loud, the same neural architecture, the same circuits lighting up. Your brain does not distinguish between talking and thinking in words. When you have a conversation with yourself in your head, you are physiologically speaking. The muscles don't move, the air doesn't vibrate, but the brain is performing the same act. The voice is real. It is happening. Inside your skull, right now, your brain is producing language. But there's a second system running alongside it, a monitoring system, a layer that checks the incoming signal and asks a single question. Did that come from me or from somewhere else? In most people, that system runs flawlessly. You think a thought, the monitoring system tags it as yours, and it registers as internal, familiar, recognizable, your own. But in some people, that system misfires. The inner voice still fires. Broca's area activates. The language is produced, but the monitoring system fails to tag it correctly. Instead of registering as internal, as yours, it registers as external, as someone else. That is what auditory hallucinations are. Not alien signal, not supernatural forces, not a mind receiving transmissions from outside. Your own inner voice, misfiring, arriving back to you unrecognized. The voice that schizophrenic patients report hearing, commanding them, commenting on their behavior, telling them things, is, in most cases, self-generated, their own thought, their own language system, their own inner speech, just with a broken return address. The line between the voice in your head and hearing voices is one misfiring system. That's not a metaphor. That's the neuroscience.
Now here's the part that changes how you think about your own mind. That monitoring, the one that tags thoughts as yours, can also be influenced by what the voice is saying. A meta-analysis across sports psychology found that structured self-talk training improves athletic performance with an effect size of 0.48. That is not a trivial number. In performance science, that is the margin between finishing on the podium and finishing off it, the world record and the runner-up. The voice in your head is not just background noise. It is active infrastructure, but it runs in both directions. The same research community that documented self-talk's power to improve performance has also documented what happens when the voice turns against you. Negative self-talk running on a loop, repetitive, self-critical, relentless, produces patterns of thought that are clinically indistinguishable from the early stages of depression. The voice that builds you up and the voice that breaks you down are the same system, same circuits, same mechanism, same voice. Which brings us back to Vygotsky, because his most disturbing conclusion wasn't about children or development or neuroscience. It was about where the voice comes from in the first place. He argued that the inner voice, the one you experience as your private self, your internal narrator, the voice that feels most fundamentally like you, it is constructed entirely from the outside, from the voices of parents, teachers, peers, from the instructions they gave you, the corrections they made, the way they explained the world to you. The child who narrates her actions out loud is not inventing a voice. She is rehearsing the voices of everyone around her, slowly making them her own. The voice you experience as the most private thing about you, the internal monologue that feels like the core of your identity, is, according to Vygotsky, constructed entirely from other people's language. And for a small portion of people, that process works differently. The voice that everyone else is running silently, constantly, as the operating system of their mind, never fully arrived, or arrived in fragments, or arrived in feelings and images instead of words. They experience the same world. They think just as deeply. They just do it in silence. Which leaves one question that neuroscience hasn't fully answered. If the voice in your head was built from other people's words, absorbed, internalized, made silent, then when you talk to yourself, who exactly is speaking and who is listening?